International Exchange Drama School.
Exchange.
International Institute of Drama, something. Yeah. It was really, really nice. Met many great people there. Yeah. My career was to go to Hollywood. Become a movie star. Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I met the Father Moon. And yeah.
You went the other way.
I went the other way. A way that I never planned to do that, to go. And actually I met, because when I was studying drama, there was a festival that was going to take place in New York City. It was a worldwide poetry, Festival Mundial de la Poesía, like a worldwide poetry festival. And because I'm a poet, so I was invited by the Mexican government to represent Mexico.
Oh.
There were like 3 Mexicans to compete, see who was going to be the representative. I think 3 or 5, something like that. And so I became the one to represent Mexico. And
¿Y por qué, Juanito?
¿Cómo
¿Por qué te eligieron a ti?
Porque sabían que yo escribía bien, hice algunos recitales aquí y se dieron cuenta de...
Ya habían mirado tu trabajo.
Habían visto mi trabajo. And then, yeah, so when I went to...
No porque tenían más saliva.
No. Y era buen orador también.
Okay. Tu trabajo era mejor.
Sí. Y también estudié drama en México. I studied drama also in Mexico. So he had asked me why I was called, you know.
It was the best.
So, antes del festival, before the festival, actually my first spiritual experience with Jesus, and Jesus appeared to me spiritually. And that's when my life began to change. I didn't change right away. It took a long time. But that experience made me, realize, like, the spirit world is real. It's not, I cannot deny anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And then, so through that experience, in the festival, I was going to participate with my personal poem.
¿Le eché otro palito ahí?
Okay, si quieres. Aquí hay. Right. Yeah, and then when I was worried about what kind of poem I wanted to be, after meeting Jesus, I totally changed. So when he appeared, he dictated to me. I was like channeling, and I wrote a poem like in a matter, I didn't realize how long, like minutes. The whole experience, got a paper and pen, write it down, and when he was going, when the spiritual experience was over, the poem was done. And his poem won the prize.
Wow.
Yeah, #1. So it's actually due to him. And also the poem was not mine, it was his poem. And when you read that poem, it's just like a small overview of the revelation that Father Moon received from God. A small overview, because it talks about creation, God's ideal, love and peace, and then talks about the fall of Adam and Eve. And then it goes into restoration, and then the second coming of Christ, and talks a lot about the existence of the spirit world and the physical world, and the different levels in the spirit world. And actually that poem, it was, through that I was able to understand clearly Father Moon's message. Because I realized at the time that everything we do, we're responsible for, you know, everyone. And that our life in the spirit world is determined not by God or Satan, wherever we're going to go, but it determines by the kind of, the quality of life that we live in relationship to God and relationship to people. And but it took me a long time to change, because at that time I was working already in New York in a restaurant. I was a manager. I was in charge of the kitchen. Originally I started there as a chef, but I didn't want to be in the kitchen forever, so I trained other people. and then I was on the floor, worked as a busboy for a few weeks, then a waiter. Then I was in charge of the whole restaurant. So I was making a lot of money, In the 1972, I was making $1,000 a week. That was only on tips, besides my salary. You know, so that was, but at the time I thought that Satan offered all that to me, so I will not be interested in doing God's will. I will not change my life. That made it like an obstacle, because I have everything I want, everything. A beautiful apartment in the east side. New York is the west, poor people. The east side, the rich people. I was living in the east side.
And it's the opposite of over here, right?
Yeah, the opposite here. Yeah, and but anyway, at that time, I couldn't change, and that really made me angry, made me depressed, made me. I felt bad. I feel indignant because I used to have recitals and poetry. And I remember that the poems that I received, that I wrote, some of the mainly the very lyrical, very beautiful, and talk about purity and being righteous and being connected with God. But after the recitals, I remember, I would look into the camerino, you know, the place where you make up and everything, and I look at the mirror. And I would just look at myself, and I was like judging myself. I said, you're so hypocrite, you know. How can you talk about great things and live this kind of, you know, secular life? Because my job was just to be dressed well, take care of the people. Weekends, I would never miss Friday, Saturday, going to the discos, and you know, I was young, and have everything I want. So then at that time, my grandfather, thank God he passed away, he helped me. 1973, he helped me. And then after my father passed away, then he appeared to me. You know? And then I realized, well, not only Jesus is alive, but you know, everybody there. Then I met my uncle. And those kind of things encouraged me to change. So eventually I was maybe like 23 or 24 when my grandfather appeared, and he told me that we're living in the time of the second coming of Christ, and that I had a mission to fulfill. And so I didn't know what to do. So in New York City, I went and visited every single church and every single religion. I went to Buddhist temple, I went to Hindu temples, I went to Muslims, I went to Jewish synagogues, I went to the Catholic Church. I was working people, you know, they would come witness into the house, like Jehovah's Witness. And I tried to find some answers to the questions that I had, because even though I met Jesus, my grandfather appeared, I met other people, I went to the spiritual world and had many different experiences, but that doesn't mean you already know everything. It's just encouragement. It's just like an awakening that, hey, you have to do something. So I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. And then, so one time I got kind of depressed, very depressed. And one Christmas I remember, I couldn't get out for a week. I asked permission from my job. And then one day I just got up and said, no, that cannot be, you know, something I have to do. So I took a Bible, I took a book. I was reading at the time Mary Eddy Baker. You know that lady, she's from Christian Science. She's the founder. And I was reading her book, because I was reading everything, Buddhist and Confucius, all kinds of things, trying to find the answers about what Jesus told me and about what my grandfather also. My grandfather, he built a temple in my hometown, and he named it Saint John the Baptist. He dedicated his entire life to build this temple, beautiful, bigger than this temple. And So anyway, when he appeared, I tried to change, but couldn't. Then I took a Bible, took Mary Baker ready, and I went upstate New York, and to pray and to fast for, I think it was 3 days. I went to the mountains, and I stayed there, you know, like camping on myself and with the Bible. The only thing I did, I brought some candles and lighters, and just pray and pray and ask God. I said, you know, that if there is something that I have to do, you have to show me, and you have to give me the strength to change, because I really wanted to change my life. I couldn't do it. So when I came back to New York City after the 3 days, I came to my apartment. At the time I was sharing one apartment with this American lady. She was like my mother, like all the way. But she loves me like a son. And at the time she was in Europe. And I remember I just built an altar in the beautiful living room that we had. Clean everything, move everything, just put an altar, put a beautiful carpet, candle, and the Bible. And I pray for the 3 days there too. And fast for 3 days again in my house. And then I offer that. At that time I offer everything to God, actually. Because I was very, how to say, materialistic. I was not bad with people. I love to give and everything, but when I say materialistic, I love expensive things. Most of my clothes were brand name clothes and expensive things in the house and jewelry. I didn't like jewelry, but I have a lot of jewelry, just because of vanity and you know. And I have fur coats in New York. It's very cold, right? Even one friend of mine gave me not fox, it was like coyote coat, long one. So when I make the altar, I just every day offer everything to God and make a deal with God. And my deal with God was, okay, I know I have to give up everything. If you can show me what I must do, I say, I give up everything for you if you show me. So I put the jewelry in the altar. I put my expensive clothes in the altar. I say everything. I put, and at that time I had a contract already to go to Hollywood. I have offered 2 manuscripts, like for films. And so even that, I just had to sign, say yes, and study, you know. But I put them on the table and I pray to God and I say, Heavenly Father, if you show me the way that I can understand clearly what should I do, I'm willing to follow your way, your will. And in exchange, I will give everything. The most difficult for me to give is my mother. Because, you know, like Spanish families, they're so close to parents, right? And I was taking care of my mom, even though they had money, but I was sending money and everything. And but I realized that you know, without God, even my mother has no hope. So I told God that okay, I was crying and crying, and I said, you know more than I do how much I love my mother. That if you show me the truth, I will give up everything. And actually, that after that prayer, that I did it for 3 days, I would remove the things back and put it back again during the 3 days. And then at the end of those 3 days, I had a spiritual experience. Yeah. At that time, Jesus appeared, and also I had a vision about Father Moon. Incredible spiritual experience with him. And so that made me change, you know. That made me realize, wow, this is a very serious time that we are living in history. But I knew him only in my vision. I didn't know him personally, you know. So, because my mother, the American lady, was in Europe, at the time she asked me to go to 34th Street in Manhattan, and Fifth Avenue to pick up something. I went, and on the way back, that's when I met one Japanese sister, and she invited me to go to my first introduction to the Divine Principle, to the teachings of Father Moon. At the time, he was not persecuted, he was not controversial. He became so controversial and everybody went against him when thousands and thousands of young people followed it. People, religious people in government was afraid, you know. And then he was accused of brainwashing, mind control, and all kinds of evil things. But few people know, you know, actually about what kind of man he is. You know. And those that joined at the time that I joined, 1974, many of those we were actually guided by the spiritual world. You know, like for example, at the time of Jesus, not so many people knew who Jesus was, right? Not so many people. It was revealed originally. They're all supposed to know, because John the Baptist's father, Zachariah, he received a revelation, and Elizabeth also, right? That the only one they knew is Mary, Zachariah, and Elizabeth. But Zachariah was a high priest. So the reason he received that revelation, because God wanted the high priest to know about Jesus being the Messiah even from the mother's womb. But Zachariah never testified to others, you know. And Mary, when she was called by the angel to go to Zachariah, only remained there 3 months. And then eventually she left. So because of that, the high priest had no condition to know, because Zachariah's failure. Then when Jesus was born, we know that it was revealed to the shepherds, to the 3 wise men, the 3 kings that came from the east, right? To Anne and Simon. And so only those people, and John the Baptist, of course, was prepared and chosen by God to testify about Jesus. But actually, everybody else, you know, Jesus looked just like all of us externally. He had nothing special, you know, like any ordinary man. But inside, you know, was his difference. He was the Son of God, the Savior, the Messiah. But not so many people knew. Not so many people. Even the disciples of Jesus, they followed him not because they knew he was the Messiah, really. Had they known, they would have behaved better. But the disciples followed Jesus because they witnessed Jesus performing miracles, doing great things, right? And also feeding many people, sometimes 5,000 people feeding, doing all kinds of things to give food, give everything to the people. And they will complain sometimes. So they didn't know. But at one time, Peter, John, and James, they actually received a revelation. They had a spiritual experience. If you remember, when one time Jesus took these 3 disciples to the mountain, where Jesus was transfigured, right? And then Moses, who died 1,600 years before Jesus, and Elijah, who died 900 years, they appeared. The Bible said in glory, they were talking to Jesus. So at that time, these 3 disciples, they received a voice from heaven. God said, "This is my beloved Son, on whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." So from that time, these 3 disciples, who represents, you know, all the disciples, actually had a revelation that Jesus was the Son of God. But even with that experience, they didn't change.
They keep it quiet.
Even with that experience, they betrayed Jesus. They abandoned Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And Peter denied being Jesus' disciples in spite of that experience, you know. So, in other words, those people knew, and also the one who knew at the last moment when Jesus was arrested, was in Pontius Pilate's court. If you read the Bible, the wife of the emperor, the king, had a vision or dream that time. So he came to Pontius Pilate and told him, please don't do nothing to this. Have nothing to do with the life of this innocent man. For last night, I was in trouble because I know this man is a man of God. Please don't do anything to him. So that kind of thing, the spirit world was working. But because of the disciples' failure and because nobody else was able to stand up for Jesus, so even though he was the Messiah, the Son of God, the Savior of all humanity, when he was arrested, he was totally abandoned. Not even his own mother went to visit in prison. None of his disciples, you know. And when God was hoping that these disciples will get together and come and meet and pray, you know, so God will inspire them to go and meet Pontius Pilate's wife, so Jesus' life can be protected. Because Pontius Pilate had the position, the authority, and the power to tell the religious leaders, don't, you know, I will not kill this man. But nobody stood up for Jesus. So actually he was killed as if he was a criminal, a thief, together with two other criminals. You know. That was very unfortunate. So the time that we live in right now, also, not so many people will know about the second coming of Christ. Yes. It's exactly, the second coming is a repetition of the same events and the same kind of people, you know. Like in the second coming, of course it's important to know who the Messiah is, right? But also, who am I? What kind of role I'm playing in this time of the second coming to restore the roles of people 2,000 years ago who failed to do the will of God. Yeah. That is a very, very important, because second coming is not just the second coming of the Messiah, the second coming of similar people that were living at the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago. Yeah.
Tell him what Joseph got on the computer, and you didn't know anything about it. No, we didn't know anything about it.
Joseph, who's Joseph?
My son.
Oh, okay.
What was it?
Oh, the Jews.
About how we're gonna kill the American people.
Oh, God.
Tell me.
What was that?
I don't know your name. On the iPod, he brought something out.
Huh?
He brought, like, in the iPod, like, they're
internet.
making camps
Mm-hmm.
out in the wilderness with a lot of, they're storing tubs, like, for bodies.
What? For bodies?
The government.
Mm-hmm.
For what reason, we don't know yet, but he says
This is
that
something new to us.